Get ready to dive into the comic book realm, where heroes rise and villains take the helm. We're here to dissect the stories and the art. On source material, we tear the panels apart.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. We're celebrating 10 years here. Probably that celebration is going on as this is airing. And to help me, well, let me just dial it back here real quick. Step back. So about January, I think it might have been January 1st. It's either January 1st or January 2nd. I remember you get in the old nostalgic mood and you're thinking to yourself, hey, it's a new year. What's going to be happening this year? What are we getting into here in 2024? And a big milestone for myself is the fact that I think it's end of September, beginning of October, I've got a Facebook memory out there and tell me the exact date. I aired my first ever Source Material Comics podcast, and that's 10 years ago in 2014. So in order to celebrate, I thought to myself, I need to bring on some people I haven't had a chance to sit down and chat with for quite a while. And that is the plan. We are going to be discussing a book tonight that was chosen by one of my pals, my podcast pals, Al Sedeno. Al Sedeno, welcome back to the Source Material Comics Podcast.
I just checked. It was New Year's Eve.
That was that night. I remember thinking, I need to reach out to some people. And believe it or not, you're the first one. I've talked to 3 or 4 other people, and we've got stuff like penciled in, no date set. You're the first one I've had the opportunity to celebrate with. I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this, but I threw it to you when I sent you the chat. I was like, I want you to come on. You just pick something and we'll talk about it. Why don't you let the listeners know what you chose?
We are reading, and this is because this company has had multiple incarnations of life, and all their series have had multiple incarnations.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, we're talking about the original, well, not the original company, but the original series. Quantum and Woody by Priest and Bright. So we are talking the 97 series. So it's by Valiant, but not the first Valiant, the second Valiant, Acclaim.
This is the second. Yeah, this is Acclaim. I would have to go back into the history. I feel like Acclaim became Valiant and then became Acclaim again, or Acclaim was always Valiant. I can't remember. I remember, I'd have to look it up. Regardless, Quantum and Woody is a book that I heard about. Our good buddy Evan Bevins brought it up before. I was essential at this point. I think I did not get in on the discussion for Christopher Priest's Black Panther. They did that at some point for the Source Material Comics Podcast. So I'd heard about him in the periphery. I don't know if I've ever sat down and had a chance to read a full set of issues that Christopher Priest wrote. So what drew you to this? Was it just the names, or were you always like, I've got to read Quantum and Woody, or have you read it before?
Oh, no, I was reading it. Well, I didn't read it from issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been a fan of Priest since his run on Justice League Task Force.
Okay.
It was coming out right before, so we're talking mid-90s, because Justice League Task Force ended right before, like a month before Morrison's JLA started. When they announced the Marvel Knights Initiative, which was when Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Quesada came over and took over a couple titles.
Right.
And that's when Kevin Smith started, they restarted Daredevil, and that's when Kevin Smith was writing it. And
right.
Black Panther was one of them. I'm like, oh, I know that guy. I like his stuff. And then at some point, I heard he had another series from the New Valiant. I'm like, oh, I'm missing this. So I started picking it up with issue 4.
That's an introductory issue.
And then went back and got the first 3 issues and then continued to the end.
Okay.
So yeah, I always like Bright's artwork anyway. I like him, and I definitely like Priest. So yeah, I want to read this.
As far as Christopher Priest goes, just pulling up Mike's Amazing World of Comics and kind of giving you an idea where he started and some of the stuff that he had done. You can, if you guys remember Crazy Magazine, a publication that Marvel put out, I felt like a Mad Magazine kind of spoof. He started writing in 1980 for that magazine. So he's got quite a career in comics starting 44 years ago. There's a lot of humor involved, and that definitely did not leave him. There are bits throughout this Quantum and Woody 8 issues that we're going to be talking about that really stuck out so much. I've got a list of my favorite bits for each issue as we go through. He writes some funny stuff sometimes. Crazy Magazine doesn't surprise me. Looks like he was on Power Man and Iron Fist in the 80s.
For a long time, yeah. 'Cause this was back before he changed his name. If you look for his credits back then, you're going to see Jim Owsley.
Yes. Conan the Barbarian has got quite a few of those under his belt. And that's getting into the late 80s. He gets over into DC doing some action comics there. Looks like in 88. He's doing more work at DC, probably because it's Action Comics Weekly, of all things.
I believe he was doing the Green Lantern. I believe he's the writer that killed off Katatmatui. which is Jon Stewart's wife or girlfriend at the time.
Oh, wow.
He also was co-writer or writer, I forget which, on one or two, both of the Emerald Dawn series. The Green Lantern Emerald Dawn that read Hal Jordan's origin.
And then as we get into the 90s, it looks like he's doing a lot of work. Marvel Superheroes number 13 appears to be one of his last Marvel works in 93 before he really just kind of mainly stays DC. And then he kind of dabbles in Valiant a little bit. Solar Man of the Atom number 44 and 45. It looks like he writes a couple issues there. But he's mainly DC. And so at this time, this is 97 when issue 1 comes out. This has got the on sale dates, February of 97 when Quantum and Woody number 1 comes out. But prior to that, shortly before that, if you were catching issues of Steel, he'd done some of that. Total Justice, he did issues 1, 2, and 3 there. And like you had said, Justice League Task Force.
He also wrote the Ray ongoing series.
I was going to ask you. I think I remember issue 1 and exactly what it looks like. But I do not remember anything that happens in it. What was the Ray? It's just Ray?
Ray. Okay. Ray. It was supposed to be like the legacy character from the Golden Age character, the Ray. He didn't write the 6-issue miniseries, which was drawn by Joe Quesada, which he did not write at all, and then he wrote the ongoing series. His style is very much, it's a little similar to Quantum Woody. It's quirky and weird. The Ray was actually working, and when I say working, I don't mean as in a supervillain. I mean as in his boss was Vandal Savage.
Okay, all right.
And he thought he was playing Vandal Savage, and Vandal Savage was playing him. And it tied in a lot with Justice League Task Force because the Ray was a member of Justice League Task Force.
As funny as these books can be, as humorous as they are, there are some twists and turns sometimes. Yes. I could tell. Just with Quantum and Woody, that sounds like...
and they were quirky and a little off-kilter. You know, they weren't 100% traditional superhero stuff.
He's wrote every issue from 1 to 28. Wow. He's got quite a legacy. When he starts something, he sticks on it.
All 62 issues of that Black Panther run. The Black Panther that we think of now and the Black Panther that, you know, they portray in the movies is largely based on how he interpreted the character. You read Black Panther before him and then you read his run and you're like, oh, yeah, this is the Black Panther they're using.
This is where it's coming from.
Yeah.
60 issues, man, that is nothing to sneeze at. That's legacy right there. And of course, when a lot of people talk about Christopher Priest, within a sentence or two later, or the same sentence, it's Black Panther's coming up.
Yeah, because Black Panther, Quantum Woody, those are some of the bigger ones he did. Quantum Woody was more cult, but very popular cult. Black Panther, just because that was such a big one. He's the only one that started on those Marvel Knights books that stayed to the end.
I don't know if they had a much more freedom. You know, today, an independent publisher, they're going to have a little bit more freedom than the big two does. Sometimes a lot more freedom. If you go into Image Comics, you can do, if you're going to sell comics and it's not overly offensive, they will let you write anything you can. And the reason I'm bringing that up is Valiant, I feel like they probably were a little bit more strict on what they could put out there, but there was clearly a little bit more leeway in some of the subject matter they could approach, because I don't remember reading any Marvel comics that were anything like Quantum and Woody in the 90s. Then again, I didn't read all of them. So, and I know we dropped the code. Yeah. So the code gets dropped, but it's still Marvel. We still have a brand that we kind of want to try and make sure that.
That's the thing, is that they had a bit more freedom because it wasn't Marvel DC that hadn't been around for 40, 50 years.
Right.
So that gives you a little bit, even if they're trying to go with the same demographic and stay in the same lines more or less, they do still have a little bit more freedom in the fact that it's not like, well, we can't do that. We don't do that here.
Now, switching gears, let's talk about our artist here. M.D. Bright on the inside cover. It's Mark. I found it. So his first name Mark, but he's going by M.D. Bright. And when you pull up his resume, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, wow. So he apparently penciled an issue way back in 77, House of Mystery 257. But then he, had at least according to Mike's Amazing World, there was a little bit of a break in between when he started becoming a pretty regular penciler. But he was doing mostly Marvel. And of course, I didn't look and compare issues, but I assume that's where he had to have hooked up with Christopher Priest is Power Man and Iron Fist. Does that sound about right?
He might have done something with him beforehand, but I know that definitely is something they did early on together.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like Priest is doing issues Power Man Iron Fist 111, and then 117 is when it looks like a Bright comes on. Or no, I'm sorry, 115.
And they're both on to the end of 125.
Yeah. So anyway, they're writing stuff there. Mostly Marvel, and then Action Comics Weekly as well is in here. So he's doing, you probably already mentioned they were doing Green Lantern there, because it looks like the Action Comics Weekly that's listed here is the Green Lantern portion of things. And that's as we get into the late 80s, going into early 90s. Bright's got some pencils on G.I. Joe, a real American hero.
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, looking at it, I realize I might be wrong. Look, because he penciled the Falcon miniseries in '83, and I'm 99% sure Priest wrote that.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
well, there you go.
Where they first hooked up.
Very nice. So then, yeah, Green Lantern, Valor, he's sticking around DC there in the early 90s. Almost what Priest is doing. He's doing mostly DC, dabbling in a little bit of Marvel. And then when Quantum and Woody comes along in the late 90s, he had been penciling Icon, which is part of the Milestone comics from DC, right? And then Static as well. So it looks like he has a couple issues of Static there.
Icon here. He's only missing a few issues, but...
Right. As far as the art style, I didn't read much of the Milestone comics. I have had a chance to cover a couple of them on Unspoken Issues. We talked about, oh my goodness, I want to say it was one of the first runs, I believe. So it might have been Icon #1. Let me look at the cover of this. I think it was Icon #1. We were doing the launch titles for the Milestone universe. That's what we ended up, or the Milestone imprint.
Oh, so it would have been what? Hardware, Icon, Static. What was the group book?
Blood Syndicate, right?
That's it. Thank you.
So I probably had a chance to see some of Bright's artwork prior to this, but it's got a great 90s style. Everything that's in this book in Quantum and Woody, I appreciate it. None of the art took me out. It felt like a great 90s style. Quantum is drawn like, this superhero that could pop off the pages of Image Comics for sure.
Yeah, but he's great at tell. He's a great storyteller here. You can tell it's not just splash pages.
Some of my favorite bits are him and Priest just getting one gag over, and it may take 3 or 4 panels to get the gag over, and it's great. You got Priest and you got Bright coming together to tell this story. It's done pretty well. I think that's all I want to cover here before I hop into the synopsis. We're going to break it down. Plan is to at least do the first 3 issues together, and then we'll kind of see where we go from there. Anything else on the creative team or the book itself? Well, let me stop here before I turn it over to you. So Al Sedeno says, Quantum and Woody, issues 0 through 7. I'm like, all right, I'm down. That sounds like a fun time travel thing. Quantum.
Yeah.
I really read into that title, and I was like, there's going to be all sorts of time travel. And I'll tell you what.
Story-wise, it kind of jumps around.
Oh, it definitely does. The storytelling jumps around, that's for sure. I really read too much into the title of this book. What I should have done is, instead of putting all the emphasis on Quantum, I should have really put it on Woody, because that probably... that probably would have informed me a little bit better. But regardless, that's kind of how I was coming into this. I thought it was going to be some kind of crazy science fiction story being set and just hijinks ensue. I did hear a little bit about the humor, but I was expecting more science fiction and all sorts of craziness happening. That's not the case. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you, if you're picking this book up because you think the word quantum means time travel and the two are just, there's an equal sign between them, that's not the case. That doesn't mean that this book is in any way bad. It just means don't put that expectation on.
Hate it for what it is, not what it isn't.
Exactly. Anything you got to say before I hop into this first story that we have?
I think we did a good basic covering of the creators. We can cover more stuff about the series afterwards if there's time, because I have stuff up on Priest's website to talk about. But I don't know. I think that would be more contextual if we've read it already.
So here's how I did this. I got a Google Doc here, and the way this comic book is laid out is a little bit different than your standard. When I say layout, I'm not talking about the art itself. The story is different. You may be used to like changing or turning a page, and you see a title of the story up at the top, and then as you progress through the comic book, as you progress through Quantum and Woody, you're going to see another title of a story pop up. And I guess the point I'm trying to tell you is they do a great job of kind of like, and it may only be one page, but they just, okay, hey, this is a part of the story that we're telling. And it's called Houston, We Have a Problem. And then the next one's called, the next page may be called The Price, and it may just be like 3 or 4 panels. So it's interesting that they took that, and I think it adds to the story because it gives you like just a broad overview. Like when you see Houston, we have a problem in quotes, you're just like, okay, what? It gives you a little preview of what that story is going to be. It doesn't spoil it in any way. It gives you a tiny bit of what part of the story, what part of Quantum and Woody they're going to tell. in those few panels.
It reminds me a bit of stuff you would see later on TV, like in the show Arrow, where you'll see stuff in the present, and then they'll flash back to the story that parallels or gives you an idea of motivations behind what's happening in the present. And that's very much a lot here. You'll see some stuff of them in the present, and then you'll see something in the past that relates to that or shows this has been an ongoing thing in their lives since they were kids or something along those lines.
Yeah. When would you say these two guys met?
Somewhere in childhood.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's definitely at the very latest early teens.
If not junior high, preteen.
So much of this book is not about superheroes, but more about the relationship between Quantum and Woody, which is great. I think that's great.
Yeah, actually, I think I remember from another issue later on, I think they met as babies even.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Because you find out the reason they are friends initially is because their fathers worked together. They're research partners. So they might have been together from a very early, I believe they've been together since a very early age just because it's proximity.
Right. Did they mention that they lived next door to each other in this?
Yes, they did.
Their fathers obviously become friends at some point. If they've seen each other as babies, their fathers had to have known each other around that time. Here we have two friends, possibly lifelong friends.
With a gap in between.
A bit of a space in between. The way we start out issue 1, just to throw out our creative team one more time, Christopher Priest on script, and Christopher Priest and M.D. Bright, it looks like script plot pencils, I assume, because they have all three listed there with a dash in between and those two guys' name above it. So I think that is how they have it at least listed inside the comic. Greg Adams on inks, Comic Crafts Dave Lanfear on letters, color art by Atomic Paintbrush. Our first one is called Kunta Fishbane and the Underground Railroad. Sounds like a lot of things put together in one sentence that don't really seem like they belong there until you read the story. So in this first story, Eric and Woody are moving a neighbor's dog that they believe they killed. We're just kind of thrown into the story. They're carrying this dead dog up the stairs. All the while, they're exchanging barbs back and forth. They're not pulling punches here. There's some racial things being said, some society. So I wrote down also barbs in regards to societal status. So really, the point is these two guys have been friends for a long time, and they could pretty much say anything to each other before the other one really gets upset. Somebody else would look at this and go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that."
Just in case anyone doesn't know, Eric is African-American, Woody is white. And as they're trying to build the dog up, Eric says to him, "You're an idiot. People like you should be sterilized." Belittling a people's struggle. And Woody says, "Eric, you live in Connecticut. Your big struggle is sea scallops versus bay scallops."
These two kids have obviously known each other. Even though they're at each other's throats right now, yelling back and forth, you can tell they've been friends for a while. As they're bringing the dog back up the stairs, Eric's dad comes home. They panic, drop the dog, but I'll find out it's still alive.
Yes, because they've been chased by this dog home many days. They fed him a Valium doggy treat, not realizing what would happen. And then, of course, apparently it's not what they thought would happen.
It's definitely not dead. They put it to sleep, but it is definitely not dead. Yeah. All right, so next story is called Houston, We Have a Problem. We're still in the teenage years of Eric and Woody, who are peeping Toms, and they're spying on a girl by the name of Amy Fishbane. And turns out they're accidentally looking at her mom through this window. I think Woody is at the bottom of a tree. Well, actually, I think he's in the tree looking at her.
He's on the trellis. It's like the scene from, what's it called? Animal House.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he gets Eric to go up there and runs off when Mr. Fishbane and Amy show up, and they just see Eric sitting there.
He's caught in the act, and Woody just ends up leaving him there.
Eric had something funny to say, actually.
What did he say?
He says, "Sir, the day is coming when we'll all laugh about this. Of course, by then I'll be old and you'll be dead. But the day is coming."
That's good stuff. So you kind of get an idea of the friendship between these two and possibly who might be the more carefree one. And we're going to have more examples of that versus the one who is a victim of Woody's
trouble and the one who has to try and get them out of trouble.
Exactly. Our next story is called The Price. And it's just, I think this is Woody has left school, and Eric had no idea this was happening. Essentially, The Price is about how Eric's really upset about the fact that Woody had left school, no warning, and nobody knows when he'll come back. So there's that. I mean, that's kind of rough when your best friend just up and is not at school and you have no idea why. Number one, you're trying to figure out what exactly happened and why did it happen. And unfortunately, the kids at the school this is a prep school in Connecticut,
suburban Connecticut. So, we're talking wealthy, because they're all wearing school uniforms. And of course, he gets the worst advice from one of them about why Woody might have left. And unfortunately, this sticks with him, even though we find out later that had nothing to do with it. And plus, they're kids. How could Woody leave school on his own like this?
Yeah. Now, is it right here where they say this, or does that happen later where he just says he left because you're black?
Maybe because you're black.
That's just, as I'm reading this, you could tell that this is probably, or at least something that Priest probably wanted to bring attention to. Like, hey, there are dicks that do stuff like this. There are people that are like this out there. And I didn't know if maybe something like this had happened to him in the past. I mean, people saying something that completely, just like you said, it wasn't why this person had left. There's no reason why it happened. But the only other people were trying to tell you that the reason it happened was just because of the color of your skin.
How is Woody going to, because we'll find out he didn't just leave school, he moved. It's like, he's like 14, 15 years old or whatever, maybe 16. He can't leave his house and move with his family, or at least he's part of his family, on his own.
Right.
That's not up to the teenager.
Yeah, that's right. That's the parents making a decision there. But, as a teenager yourself, Eric, I'm certain that it didn't get to him at first until he heard this over and over, which, again, prep school, probably one of the few black men in the prep school. People are just going to say stuff to be mean like that. And it starts to sink in. You start to believe it. So that's kind of
why he would go along with Woody's antics a lot of times. He is pretty immature, too.
Yeah.
He tries to act more, more mature, but he's not that mature. He's still an immature child.
Right. So this is the first inkling we get that he's suffered. He suffered a little bit when it comes to people treating him different because of the color of his skin. All right. So up next, ashes. We fast forward a little bit to the future and we learn that Eric is at a funeral. I think it's his dad's funeral, but I don't know if they're also having the funeral for Woody's dad at the same time. We do know that both of their fathers were killed. Yeah,
because they do say there, my God, both fathers.
Woody shows up at the funeral and it looks like they're about to fight. And there's a very, very iconic pose that happens throughout quite a few of these issues between the two where they both look like they're swinging at each other. That's what I thought at first. It's like, oh, they're both going to try and swing and hit each other at the same time. But what it is they are actually hitting each other's forearms together. If I remember correctly, it looks like they're about to throw down, and that's where you first see that pose. The next one is Soul of the Warrior, spelled S-O-L-E. Woody has issues with the coordinating hero outfit Eric has chosen and resists wearing white boots, but Eric reminds him of the incident with the dog.
We remember the dog. Damn it.
Yep. Our next story is called Qantas Leaps, and that's kind of what we probably feel like we've been doing, is leaping all around here. Eric, who is now Quantum, he's in his superhero outfit.
Oh, it is a blue and white skin-tight bodysuit, covers him completely from head to toe, mostly blue, but a lot of white, and of course, stuff in his belt and pouches on his leg. He has a huge white cape.
Yeah, and he has a full mask that covers his face.
Full face mask. You can not see an inch of skin on him.
Right, which will come into play later.
Yes. Woody's is a similar looking blue and white one, but there is no mask. He just has a pair of goggles on, and he's wearing a leather jacket.
Yeah, he's absolutely taking the minimalist route in this. And it's funny because they talk about this later. Quantum's trying to, at this point, there's a detective by the name of Joe Tomorrow. Well, man, how is there not time travel in this? There's a detective.
He's just teasing. Priest is just teasing you.
He really is. There's a detective named Joe Tomorrow who's investigating the deaths of their fathers. An incident has happened that has brought these two to his attention. Eric explained to them that they have been wrongly accused of killing both their fathers. So apparently that was one of the things that the detective was trying to get or at least make sure that they were not the ones that killed their fathers. Their fathers died in a helicopter crash, right? Unfortunately, their fathers have passed away, and they were originally accused that. They're trying to say, look, we're not part of this at all. We want to find out who killed our fathers, too. The next story is called The Onion Killeth. Quantum is headed to find his dad's chief assistant, David Warrant, for some answers. Quantum's trying to put things together, and the first suspect he can think of is his dad's chief assistant, David Warrant. He wants to find him for answers to determine if he was involved in his dad's death. Eric is wearing these large armbands, and I think we've jumped back a bit in time because when Joe's interviewing them, they're already in their getup. So Eric's got these armbands on, and he explains to Woody, like, yeah, I found these things. I found these in my dad's things. He has no idea what they do, so he's just decided to put them on. Eric convinces Woody, come with me. I'm going to
trail
go.
warrant.
Yeah, we're going to go trail warrant. Come with me. We're going to check it out. As they're sitting there trailing this guy, they start to get into this argument. It's Woody that's goading things on. He's like, how do you know those armbands aren't mine? How they weren't my dad's? So they get into this argument, and Woody takes one of the armbands and puts them on himself. Now, in the meantime, Warrant just straight up leaves, and they have no idea where he's at. Eric says, okay, fine, you can have one of the armbands. Let's figure out where this guy went. They end up going back to the lab that David Warrant worked at. All right. So the final story of this is called It Takes a Village. Quantum and Woody enter the lab. So this is Eric and Woody, I should say, enter the lab. But they continue to argue as 15 years of resentment bubble up into a full-blown fight. This is the first point in this book where we actually get the N-word written out on these pages. It's a flashback, if I remember correctly. It was somebody saying that, he left because you were black, but he called him the N-word. And it was... I think it was.
Right. Yeah.
They get into and this is where Woody's like, just because everybody was saying this, you believed it. The fight continues. They soon realize that they have walked into
what their fathers were building, which was they had nearly completed the world's first electromagnetic containment field.
Exactly. They walk into this room that gets sealed, and they watch Warrant on the other side of this glass go over to this large panel, and all of a sudden, electrical charges and contraptions start humming. As these two are yelling and screaming at each other, trying to get Warrant to stop doing what he's doing, everything starts to glow. And my notes here were that it transformed the pair from matter to energy. So there's how our superheroes become superheroes. They continue to fight throughout this whole process. At some point, their armbands crash together as they each throw a punch. The next thing they remember, they are blown from the lab, laying out in a field. Joe Tomorrow's found both of them outside of the facility lying on the ground. That right there was issue 1.
Yeah, and also during the fight, we get a little bit of background on what happened with Woody when he left, which was he didn't know Eric's phone number because he lived next door. He said, my mom told me you moved away, so I didn't write. When Eric accused him, said, oh, you couldn't get yourself off the sun deck. He's like, I had a fire escape. I was broke.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Because as we'll see going further on, Woody lived very, very poor.
Right.
As we'll see, so like some of the people he was friends with and knew, a lot of the people he knows, and you'll see this further in the series, he knew a lot of street people lived in the street. A lot of homeless. They were his friends.
Was absolutely wrenched from that life of
Privilege.
Excess, and privilege, right? And taken out of there and put into a completely different class, societal class that he was in. But yeah, I mean, Eric blames him for just leaving him. And now granted, Eric makes some good points, like you couldn't write, or you couldn't get in touch with me. Like what's up with that? But like you said, Al, sometimes, especially back in the 90s, I mean, it wasn't just as easy as picking up a phone and calling somebody or getting on a computer and sending an email. Not the easiest. And that would have probably been the 80s for these guys at the age that they are. Well,
he says that, when he talks about the funeral, Woody says the first time he saw him in 15 years. So if we're assuming that this is 97, that means 82.
Wow. Yeah. So it's not easy. I mean, I can tell you that for myself, there are 3 or 4 people, even in this day and age. Of course, I'm not exactly going out looking for them. I'm sure they have a Facebook page. But back in 83, 84, when the girl I knew in kindergarten ended up leaving and moving to Florida, I never talked to her again. And
I lived in New York, and we moved to Florida, actually. I was not that girl, though. But the people I knew there, I never talked to them again. And we moved from Florida like 3-4 years later, like 84. Guess what? Never talked to any of those people again. Because
right. You just didn't have the opportunity or the ease of access to do so. And plus, you're a kid. You kind of have your options limited sometimes if that's the case. But anyway, as we get through the first issue, you can see it's a lot about the relationship between these two. And now they're becoming superheroes together. All right. Getting into issue 2. Curious? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because the trade I'm reading has a few extra sequences that they put in the original trade.
Oh, what's this?
So one of them is called Let This Be Thy Final Battleground. And it's basically, and this is where I got it from, Toddler Woody meeting Toddler Eric.
Oh, really? What happens there? Is there anything special that happens?
Yeah, you see Eric in the playpen. He's putting all those stuffed animals in a row, very nice and organized. And you hear the mothers. You don't see them. You just see the mothers talking. Lucy, hi, come on in. Oh, and this must be Baby Woodrow. His name is Woody. He threw my purse out the window. Then he unscrewed his bottle and poured milk in my hair. Hello, Woody. How are you? He's fine. I need a shrink or an exorcist.
Yeah, that's Woody.
They put Woody in there, and he's wearing. Eric's looking all calm, and Woody has like this face of evil with like a toy baby, plastic toy guitar and a bib that has music things, and he just starts wailing on the stuffed animals. And when baby Eric goes to stop him, he pulls his diaper off and throws it over Eric's head.
Oh wow, that's Woody for you right there. Even in the crib, that boy was cutting up.
There's one called Treats, which is probably a little older. Well, yeah, several years older, obviously, because they're they can talk. Trick or treating, and it looks like Woody's dressed like Nixon. And oh god, I can't remember his name, but there was a sci-fi type series, original character series that Acclaim had, and Eric's dressed up like him.
Oh, okay.
And Woody's all pissed off because the neighbor, they gave him an apple, so he pees on their car.
Oh, jeez.
He's like, I'm giving him a trick for a treat. And while that's happening, there's a bunch of bigger kids that show up to try and take their candy, and basically Eric beats the hell out of them.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. Well, again, it's setting that in motion to let you know who these characters are, and the bulk of our story are going to be these two guys and their humanity. It's not about them being superheroes. It's more about the people who they are. So yeah, that's good stuff. All right, issue number 2, Curious Bubba and the Gene Pool. Eric is mistaken for a kid who was bussed to a restaurant as an employee and made to get on a bus just as Amy Fishbein arrives. His race is coming into play, even though he is one of the most privileged people who absolutely deserves to be there. Just because he's black, they're putting him back on the bus because everybody that works there gets bussed in and then bussed out. Because nobody else, from the Bronx, nobody else wants to work there.
It's a flip burger because it's like a McDonald's, basically.
Right. Okay. Then when we open this issue for real, Quantum and Woody are scaling a building, planning to investigate a murder suspect by the name of Frank Marshall, when the pair gets sprayed with some water guns from a couple of kids, which I don't know who these kids are. They just show up out of nowhere. Was there an explanation as to why these kids were just like...
It's New York in the 90s. They didn't have cable. They had to make their own fun. And Woody gets into an argument with them.
That argument is hilarious.
And by the way, I love the first page which basically just looks like Batman and Robin from the 60s show climbing up the building.
That was the first thing I thought of when I saw that. Oh yeah, and by the way, they're not a couple, just to let you know. They are not a couple, and you get told that quite a few times. So anyway, these kids are like spraying Quantum and Woody, these superheroes, with water. Woody does get into an argument with one. They actually begin to fall, but Woody makes a save, and the police show up. I remember Eric uses his grapple gun, but it ends up hitting an air conditioner or something, and the air conditioner falls off.
His weight pulls it down, so Woody flings over on the rope and grabs him. While the police are talking to him, you can hear the crowd below constantly yelling, "Jump, jump, jump!"
Right. So the police show up, believing the two are jumpers, and also a couple. And Woody makes sure we're not a couple. Then the two begin to scale the building again, but have trouble breaking a window. And then then they have to deal with the crowd down below yelling for them to jump off of there.
Also, the cops once the cops realize what they're doing, oh, you're going to bust Frank Marshall? Good luck. We've been after him for years.
Yeah. The next story, Captain Flashback versus Mr. Reality. Eric and Woody begin to realize their powers are causing them to dematerialize. So this is at some point prior to what's going on here. But anyway, they start to realize their powers are causing them to dematerialize, and Eric realizes that banging their armbands together fixes things. And since the accident, they also seem to be permanently stuck on their arms, and they have to link up every 24 hours or things start to dematerialize again. Now, in this same story, Woody also learns that he will not get the inheritance from his father until he is 45 years old.
Yes. So his father was mad when he was 11. So he was 11 when this happened. When he moved, because apparently it's what does the lawyer say? During your parents' divorce proceedings, the judge asked you which parent you wanted to live with. Hey, I was 11. What did I know?
Yeah, he chooses his mom, and the dad is so mad about it that he's like, you have a delay on your inheritance for 2 years for every year you were with your mom.
So it's until you're 21, and then adding on 2 years for every year you live with your mother, and he lives with his mom for 12 years.
That is rough. So he's not going to get any money.
You will have limited access to the money through the estate's executor. He looks over at Eric. Because his father would have been it, and since his father's passed away, it's passed to him.
Yep. Eric is now in charge of giving him his allowance. There's also a lot of discussion about the tumultuous stuff that happened when Woody left. Woody points out that Eric must resent Woody for the way others treated him when Woody left school. Driving that home, how those kids treated Eric continued to believe what these guys were saying. The next story is called More, and this kind of flashes back to when Woody talks to, they realize that, okay, well, hey, we have these energy powers or with these bands. Woody's like, well, let's do something with it. Let's actually, put this to use. And Eric agrees. Eric also wants to take it a little bit further than
Woody
Woody's
wanted to put up neighborhood watch sign. What's that crime dog's name again?
Oh, the old McGruff?
Yes.
McGruff the crime dog. Yep. Eric agrees, but he wants to take it a bit further. Then we get a story called Beretta and a Zippo, where they finally figure out how they're going to, what they're going to do here as far as costume goes and code names. Eric dons his superhero costume and code name Quantum, while Woody plans to use just a Zippo and a lighter going by the name. And I love the pause because he's trying to figure out, what does he say? He says, he does the Batman thing.
Yeah, criminals are superstitious and cowardly. I think I'll call myself Woody.
So Woody is going to be Woody. And yes, boy, that strikes fear in the hearts of men.
The best part is when he asks Eric, what is all that crap? Because he has a whole bunch of pouches. And this is one of the few times we actually are like, oh, that's what's in the pouches. Because usually the pouches were just decorative.
Right.
But this is, they have tactical field material, survival gear, evidence containers, comlink apparatus with redundant subroutines. And you, 9mm Beretta and a Zippo lighter.
Perfect superhero material. So there we go. That's our little glimpse into how Quantum and Woody chose to be who they are. Dead Woman Lying is the next story and the final story in issue 2. Quantum and Woody are with the police investigating a murder of the wife of a man named Ed Palmer. The police believe that Ed Palmer did it and left with her car, while Quantum, Eric, believes it was an arms dealer, Frank Marshall. So here we go. This is how we kind of got to the beginning of this story. Eric believes that Frank Marshall is the one that killed Ed Palmer's wife.
Because he had called the house 20 minutes earlier.
He's got evidence to support that. Did you have anything extra between 2 and 3 in yours?
Yes. Called Men in Black, which is where they're at a costume store looking for costumes. Trying to go through. They dress like Power Man and Iron Fist. They dress like the Falcon and Green Lantern. They dress like Icon and Hardware and Iron Man. Priest and Bright both worked on the Spider-Man vs. Wolverine one-shot that came out in 1987. And in that, I don't know if you how long ago you read that one, but in that, remember, Spidey is in, because this is, remember, pre-Berlin Wall falling, and this takes place in Berlin, and he's over there in West Berlin and doesn't have his costume, so he goes to a costume store looking for a black costume, because he was wearing a black costume at the time. And the guy's like, no, I just have this red and blue one I was going to wear for a Halloween thing. And it's the Spider-Man costume, but it says on the back, Die Spine. The spider. And hanging very prominently in the costume shop is that costume, too.
Some deep cuts. Nice. Very nice. And I wonder, if I was reading this back in 97, I would have had no idea. But we just covered why all those characters are being picked. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So then we get into issue 3. And our first story is called The Pot Calls the Kettle a Cab. And we are getting a glimpse back into Eric's past. Once again, he's getting accosted by some other African-American teens. He's able to make quick work of them, though. And getting in a cab, as he's riding with the cabbie, he remarks that some black kids attacked him. And the cabbie looks back
at him. Blazer. He needs to get to a tailor.
The cabbie looks back at him.
This is probably right after he got off the bus from the McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right. You know what? That's probably right. So he gets, he's let off there and he needs to try and get back home. And the cabbie looks in the mirror and goes, after he says some black kids attacked him, he goes, have you looked in the mirror lately, kid? And then he kicks him out of the cab.
Well, because his answer is, I need you to drive me to Greenwich. It's an emergency. I've got to get to my tailor before he closes.
Get out of the car, kid. Oh, man. So, yeah, Eric's... It's definitely kind of like a fish out of water.
Very much, except, of course, the fact that he actually is capable in that regard. Mm-hmm. He's very much like Carlton in the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
That's a perfect comparison.
He was born rich and privileged, and he behaves that way. And, Woody is more like, it's actually very much like Fresh Prince.
Oh, that's interesting. My description of Woody that I had written down here was that he was, and there are going to be instances throughout the next few issues, but he's very much a guy who gets by on as little as he possibly can, and he always seems to get by with it. Like, he ends up at I'll talk about it here in a second, but you can just see it. You've probably known some of these people in your life. You're just like, how is that guy actually doing what he's doing and in the position that he's in? There's no way he should be in the position that he's in because of how he acts or who he is. There are people that I know, I'm just like, this guy fell ass backwards into this, and there's no way he should have. All right. Next story, Quantum and Woody are investigating Frank Marshall's place when Frank arrives. Quantum explains he has evidence that Frank called looking for Ed Palmer shortly before the murder. Frank insists, this is such, I mean, like, how do you believe this guy? But he says, no, it was the wrong number. Quantum doesn't believe him, but says he'll check his story out. And
they're also tracing this suspicious dye that he found. As Quantum says, there are traces of this phosphorus dye in some of these weapons. I remember studying similar compounds. They're typically used in textile manufacturing. And it was what he tasted. He goes, it's Kool-Aid, cherry. Looks like fruit punch, but not citrus.
And then, like, Frank is like trying to get these guys off of his back and actually points them to where the Kool-Aid's at that he actually gets. Because if I remember correctly, doesn't he go over and grab a thing of Kool-Aids?
Yeah, he goes, talk to me about the Kool-Aid. The cabinet, over by the sink, second shelf on the left. Cherry or fruit punch? Cherry. Fruit punch is too citrus.
This issue has my favorite bit of all issues in it. You may know right off the top of your head which one it is, but...
Car.
What's that?
Is it the car?
It's the car. It's absolutely the car. I mean, we get a whole page. They decide they've got to leave Frank Marshall's. But they leave two different ways. Quantum decides that, hey, I could get down to the car by scaling the building and doing all sorts of fun, heroic stuff all the way down to the car. And he does that. You follow him, get down to the car, and then he gets in the car and he sits and he sits. And he sits and he sits. And there's like, I don't know how many panels, dude, but there's panels of just him sitting in the car.
5 panels of him sitting, because it's a convertible. He jumps right, it lands off on the back, hops right into the seat. He's ready to go.
That's so great. And then finally, Woody walks out and gets in the car.
But first he checks pockets. He's like, no. Oh, there they are. And he gets in the car and Eric's just staring. He was like, what?
Oh, it's the absolute best bit of visual storytelling when you look at that, because you just watch him do this, all these heroics and all these fun gymnastics just to get down there, and then he has to sit and wait for Woody to come down the dang stairs or the elevator and actually have
the elevator left, waited for it. Probably somebody else was going down to a different floor.
All right, the next story is called The Goat. The cover of this issue.
Goat on the cover.
Yeah, it has the goat on the cover. And, you're thinking that it's going to be this villain or something. But anyway, it's not. Woody grabs a goat on their excursion. So they're off to find this dye. And he grabs a goat. They go to find some monks that Quantum believe has a connection to this dye.
And they're in Malaysia.
Okay, so they're in Malaysia and did some kind of trading. Anyway, Woody's got a goat. That's really all you need to know here. They go to the monks, and Woody threatens to kill the goat and blow its brains out, and they decide to tell him, even though they took a vow of silence, somehow they explain, look, and you need to go see somebody about this. The next story is called Dimed. The duo's next stop is Terrence Magnum's secret hideout. So the monks point them in the direction of Terrence Magnum's secret hideout, but have to survive the attack of a couple helicopters first.
While they're scaling a cliff.
Yeah, while they're scaling a cliff. Woody believes the monks gave Terrence the heads up, so after they left, apparently they monks
dropped a dime on him.
They're able to escape, but find Terrence has already left the headquarters they're going to, the secret hideout, and the clue is left on an Egyptian blade. We went from some red dye to Malaysia to talk to some monks that had taken a vow of silence. Now we have found an Egyptian blade that might lead us to the whereabouts of Terrence Magnum.
And they're riding a camel.
Our next story is called Humped, where they are riding a camel.
Well, the best part, because it's very short, because you just get a few panels of the camel, and then you go back to them talking to Joe, because this is still them talking to Joe.
Right.
But Magnum wasn't in Egypt, was he? Quantum read the wrong glyphs. I translated the right one. Right on the back hilt. Made in Taiwan.
Made in Taiwan.
So they go to Taiwan.
Yes. The next one is called Who? Question mark. Finally reaching Magnum in Taiwan, Magnum surrenders and points to a hidden circuit board that could read U.S. military codes. Not what the guys showed up there for. When Quantum asks about Ed Palmer's wife, Magnum has no idea who he's talking about.
Who?
The story ends with Detective Joe Tomorrow advising the guys to leave the crime fighting to the police.
Because as on our end, we found Ed Palmer in his dead wife's car with his girlfriend and 6 bottles of tequila. Ed Palmer does not know Frank Marshall, who dialed Ed's house by mistake.
And they knew this.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, they knew this at the beginning. The cops were telling them the husband did it. He left with the car. And Eric's like, no, look at this, look at that. And they go on this wild goose chase.
They did do something. They, Magnum had part of a circuit board and a piece of decryption device that could read in U.S. military codes. So,
they fell so obviously backwards into it. It was hilarious because Magnum's sitting there and he goes, all right, you found me. You got me. I give up. Here it is. Go over there and look. And they find the secret compartment with the circuit board on it. They're like,
what's this?
He's like, they have no idea what's going on. It's such a good story. I mean, this is a great way to open this book. 1 through 3. They go on this wild goose chase. Go ahead.
The last panels are walking out the police station. It's the 2 of them in costume with the goat, and the goat is wearing a cape.
He has a mask on at that point. And I assume the goat, because I'm pretty sure the goat shows up a couple more times.
Oh, yeah, the goat stays around.
Yeah, he needs to. He can't go anywhere.
The goat's permit. This is, Dick Grayson. This is Robin. Goat's
yes. So as far as my favorite bits out of these first 3, I already talked about what my absolute favorite was. I picked one for each issue. There was in issue 1, there was mention about, I learned a new term called crash spray, which I had no idea what that was before reading this book 2 or 3 days ago. Never even heard of the term. Have you ever heard of crash spray before?
Not before reading this.
Yeah. So just to let our audience know, crash spray, according to Woody here, if I remember, I've got the panel here. Digital drums have these canned crash cymbals. The decay on live drums is not as even. That is the term crash spray. You can tell by how the cymbals sound. The crash cymbals sound.
I guess they end too perfectly, I guess.
I guess so. And I remember Woody's like obsessed with like trying to figure out where a CD player's at because he can hear the crash spray. Crash spray, something I learned. Issue 2, where they determine where code names are. Eric goes with Quantum and Woody goes with Woody. That's hilarious. Issue 3, already talked about. There's actually quite a few things that happen in issue 3 that are great. Obviously the car bit. The fact that it says made in Taiwan on the dagger, and that's what actually gets them to find the bad guy and then leave the crime fighting to us. Anything else on issues 1 through 3 before we move on?
I think we covered it all.
I love it.
It was so much fun, and yet there's such tension between the 2 of them.
These guys...
Which is what makes the comedy, is the fact that they're both angry and upset.
All right, issue number 4, Speckling the Fourth Wall. If you've read Quantum and Woody, you probably know what issue 4 is about. It had to have left a mark in your mind. When I read this, I was like, anybody that says Quantum and Woody to me from here on out, this is the issue that I'll be thinking of. The first story is called Speckling the Fourth Wall. The issue opens with Quantum and Woody advising us, the reader, that the issue should have an R rating, but Woody is a little bit upset because there will be no nipplage. Just to let everybody know.
Because nowadays R can mean anything from saying using too much gunplay to using the F word. Because they're sitting in the offices of Acclaim Comics, they tell us. They even give us the address.
Yes, they do. And then they lay out what these words are that arouse the lawyers. Now, granted, they don't completely lay them out there, but there's the S word, there's the F word, there's this, there's that. But specifically, they approach the N word, and it is going to be replaced by the word noogie for the rest of this issue.
Because, their editor starts having meetings when that thing gets brought up, and then out comes the lawyers.
That's the last thing you want to see. So already they're having this kind of standards and practices discussion with the reader and kind of laying it out there. We talked about, they used it in the first issue, or was it the second issue, somewhere around there. But they used it. They used the N word. They spelled it out.
The lawyers this is probably because of that, because the lawyers came
exactly.
out. I can almost guarantee Quantum on the last page of this little story is basically a 100% Priest speaking to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like the word. I don't use the word. I don't believe in the word. It's a word that should absolutely die. But let's not be hypocritical here. After all, only you know if you ever used the word, ever thought it. Not accusing you of anything, but I think the word comes from the problem, not vice versa.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, Priest is speaking to us through Quantum here. Of course, I'm sure, just like you said, the lawyers came out and he felt that as a creator and as somebody who is a storyteller, they have specific beliefs on what they think, what they feel they should be able to say, for sure, and what could go into a story and what type of words can be used to convey a story. When you're looking at this, the issue in which it was used, I mean, unfortunately, those things happened. So Priest is trying to get that across, like, hey, if we're going to dance around this, we're not doing this a service at all by avoiding it. It needs to be this. If this happened, if people were called this name, I should be allowed to tell a story. Christopher should be allowed to tell a story that conveys exactly what happened or what he feels would have happened at that time. In this day and age, in 97, I mean, it's still a touchy subject then, but clearly as time has moved on, it's not like that word has been taken any lighter. It's definitely had more of a weight.
And I'm not saying this is the only thing, but let's also remember at this point, the movies Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, True Romance, and Jackie Brown had come out, all by Quentin Tarantino. And it's not like that word is barely used in those movies.
Yeah, right. So again, the storyteller, if they're trying to convey a story, I agree with Priest here. I think he should be able to tell the story.
But I also think it gave him a good idea for a story. It gave him an idea for a story for this.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we're using Noogie, and as what he says, a cop out, you bet.
So moving on to Elvis and Wyatt, Quantum and Woody burst into a mall to stop a hostage crisis.
This is one of my favorite bits too.
After a brief mix-up, they are able to find the bad guy, and Woody surprises him by shooting the hostage.
Yes,
with blood capsules.
Yeah, he doesn't tell him afterwards. He shoots him. He's like, "You're crazy."
This gives time for Quantum to capture the criminal, and that's kind of where we end that. You said this is one of your favorites because you just see Woody like straight up unload on the hostage, and you're like, "What is going on?" I enjoyed that too. Did you have anything else to say on that one?
I just love the this is just worth reading. The whole thing. This is just fun.
100%.
Leave her, put her down, Paul Loser Guy, down.
All right, next up is Medicine Woman. And
again, everything in this issue.
Eric's trying to get some work done when Woody decides to play some guitar so loud. I don't know if this is just in Eric's head or this is reality, but apparently he plays it so loud, which I envision like a Marty McFly speaker. Yes. It destroys all of Eric's monitors and equipment that he has that he's sitting at. And this is not like in the same room. This is rooms away. Anyway, it destroys all his equipment. Eric goes in and shoots Woody. And you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Well, it turns out he's just fantasizing that.
Yes, he's dreaming about killing.
Yeah, he dreams about killing him. Somebody calls the cops. I don't know if it was Eric or if it was a neighbor, but the cops show up at the door and they're like, hey, we're here about the guitar. They walk in and they're like sitting there talking to Woody.
Look at the look on Eric's face of such smugness, though, right before.
Oh, he knows.
Yeah,
I got him now.
I could hear you wait on the block. I just knew it was a pre-CBS Strat. What, 68? 62? 58. And they start singing and doing it with him.
Yep. They're not there to stop the noise. Not at all. All right. Well, the next story, we go from Medicine Woman to Medicine Cabinet. Eric reminisces on why he has such a hate. And I didn't want to use that word, really, because these two guys, they're trying. They've been friends for such a long time, but I used the word resentment earlier. He kind of reminisces on why he has those feelings for Woody.
It's very succinct. It's him thinking about the person telling him maybe it's because you're black, and then the scene of him and Woody fighting in the first issue, telling him, hit me. Won't change the lie you built your life on.
Yeah.
And that's probably the other thing that makes him hate him is the fact, like, I basically believed this lie for years, and now I'm finding out that I was wrong, and how do I deal with that? I'm so angry at you for a lie.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when the truth hurts. That's the best way to put it. The good thing is that's the first step in healing, is recognizing, okay, if what I've believed for so long is actually not true, then how do I move past that? How do I reconcile that? When we look at the next few issues, we see that Eric starts to come into his own a little bit. He starts to feel like he's getting the respect he deserves. So anyway, next up is Solos. Eric meets up with Joe tomorrow and asks what it would take to be taken seriously as a hero. And there's not really much of a dialogue there. He just kind of asks, like, what would it take to do that? So you can tell that Eric, clearly he's got the superhero suit. He's got all the equipment, but he's got Woody by his side. And it's at this point, I think he's trying to figure out if Woody's dragging him down.
Well, it's also the fact that this goes with that last one, which is probably why it was right next to it. Because as he says, Woody and I are linked forever. So 50 years of guitar solos? The problem, Joe, is I can't join in. I don't know how. I can't exist in the same space as Woody. Can't compete with him. All it's less is for me to be a serious person going around serious work. Like, he doesn't know. Like, Woody seems to know who he is no matter what, and Eric is still working on that.
Right.
But he can't compete. Like I said, he doesn't know how to compete on that same level as Woody, and he's trying to figure out how he fits, where he fits in his own life.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Next up, Noogie in a cape. Quantum attempts to stop a black man apparently stealing a television. And I'm going to put apparently in quotes.
Because we find out later he doesn't.
He is not. The man continues to call Quantum, who is in a complete getup with a mask. So he is head to toe in a suit, white suit, mind you. There's white and blue. And he keeps calling Quantum a noogie.
Yeah, you a noogie in a cape on Lenox Avenue. I try to tell young people to crack me ignorant.
Quantum gets upset and asking him, how does he know that he's black? To which the criminal says he doesn't. He has no idea.
You're black? S-word.
S-word. So Woody pulls up in a cop car and
he starts
the criminal
yelling through the loudspeaker. It's the best part.
Oh, it's great. He pulls up in this cop car and immediately there's a name. This guy goes by we knew his name.
May.
Willie May immediately notices him. He's like, my noogie, welcome here. He goes over, he's talking to Woody. Here, the man explains that he bought this TV because a friend of his was low on money. So he's trying to help somebody out. And Eric is very upset with the use of the word noogie towards him. That's kind of where Noogie in a Cape ends. And then we get to Noogie with Love.
Well, I like how they end that G-Rock down on bank.
Oh.
That's what happened. His friend G-Rock was down on bank, had no money. G-Rock down on bank. Woody, is there really necessary to use that word? G-Rock was low on cash. And he's still talking to the police loudspeaker.
Such great. Yeah, the whole time, too. Like, he has a conversation with that guy on the loudspeaker, if I remember correctly. But anyway, yeah. Again, you mentioned street smart Woody. He's absolutely got these connections on the street and people recognize who he is. And of course that comes later.
He knows the lingo. Check you on the dead run, man. He's pointing at the TV. Yo, I'm vexed. My new G-Rock down on bank. Down on bank? Indeed. So we hook him up at the box. Peace out.
There he goes.
He's like, G-Rock down on bank. All right. Got it.
Done. All right. To Noogie with Love. Quantum tells Woody it's not working. Woody accidentally hits his armband on a metal pipe and Quantum disappears. And that's how we end issue 4. Where did you say issue 0 came in between 5 and 6?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There is an extra scene.
Oh, we got extra stuff.
Behold a pale goat.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
As you see them as old men arguing. I blew you off the roof. Didn't you ever blow me off the roof? Don't ever use the words blow at me and around me, Woody. Yeah, this is from the 97-year-old virgin still holding out for Amy Fishbein. Here's a bulletin for you, Romeo. She's dead, and it wasn't that good anyway.
Oh.
So they basically have a bit of a fight, and Woody's control band comes off.
That's what I was going to say. Like, do
I
they
must
still
have
have
hit
the
latch in it. They could come off all along.
That's great. I'm sad that I missed that. We know these guys have these armbands on until they're 97. That's funny. Eric is unconscious after being thrown back from the blast after he hit his armband. While out, he dreams of stopping a corrupt senator named Othello. I was swerved a little bit here reading this issue right at the beginning. I was like, oh, wow, we got a real superhero adventure going on now.
Well, this is like a whole spy thing of like Woody is a cab driver knocking out people that are supposed to be going to this thing so they can get their invitation. They have somebody that modifies the security to make it look like Woody's. And, they have a partner, looks like it's older Amy. And they're in there, and Quantum shows up to take the guy out, and all his men have been knocked out.
I was like, wow, okay, now, this feels like a 90s superhero comic. Definitely a little bit different from what we had before. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a dream. It was all a dream. This is obviously in Eric's mind what he wants to be, what he aspires to be.
But you can tell it's a bit of like a child type fantasy because they have the fight, and Woody goes to, break it up, and Amy's like, Woody, he has to do this alone. Screw that, Amy. That's my friend. I'm like, that's such like a teenage power fantasy type thing.
Yeah. If you were reading this, you'd probably be like, oh, boy, this dialogue seems awful strange compared to what we got before.
Yeah. And then you start seeing Eric being yelled louder and louder until you realize it's not the dream Woody. It's the real Woody.
Yeah, it's the real Woody.
Which brings us to the next story.
Nana. In an alleyway, Woody and Quantum try to figure out the way the armbands work, assisted by Woody's friend, the Batman. The two begin to realize what weapons the armbands are by destroying essentially everything that I think the Batman, which we find out later, his name is Taylor.
Yeah, Taylor. He's a street kid, lives in the street.
Right.
Because they accidentally destroy the shopping cart he has, which he says is his home.
It's all his possessions. They fire at it once, and then I think they fire at it again. Eric fires at it again and completely vaporizes it.
Well, yeah, Woody's his force. Eric is like energy.
Right,
Eric can
that's
just destroy stuff. Woody kind of just blasts things.
So soon after that, Detective Tomorrow comes asking them for some help. And then we get into the next story, which is called I Am. A young baby has been kidnapped by their mother from an ICU and is in imminent danger. Quantum devises a way to track her, following her to a theater, actually rescuing the infant. Quantum begins to realize that others are starting to see him as the superhero that he aspires to be. There's very much, there's a couple times throughout these issues where Quantum or Eric looks at Tyler, whatever his name was, and says, hey, the Batman. I'm going to call him the Batman. I don't care if the lawyers are going to get after him.
Well, because he is a bat. That's what he uses.
That's right.
That's why they call him Batman, because he has a baseball bat. That's his protection.
Man. Have you ever heard of, oh my goodness, there is a video game called Ninja Baseball Batman. Oh. and if you ever get a chance, it is a fighter. It's like a Final Fight or one of those type of games where you walk around and you're fighting people. It is wild because the enemies are all baseball themed and you're this guy that carries a bat. You're a super ninja baseball Batman. That's what this guy reminds me of for some reason. There's points in which Eric is finally starting to hear people refer to him by his superhero code name. And I think
Taylor,
that...
And what do you call him?
Yeah, he's starting to feel a little bit more inspired, and he's starting to realize that they see him as a superhero, as Quantum and not Eric anymore. Which, man, I'm sure there are some levels of psychology and stuff that you can dig into, especially racial inequality and the identity of self and who you are and how he was seen in the past versus how he's being seen now. I'm not qualified to get into any of that, but if anybody really wanted to sit down and see what Christopher Priest was trying to get across with just that element alone, I'm sure there's something he's trying to say here. I didn't have to go through those struggles, so that's probably why I don't have much to say on it, because I never had to live it. I'm sure other people out there can see that Eric's trying to... It's not that he's trying to be somebody that he isn't. It's more like he's just trying to be somebody more than who he is.
Yes.
So
I can go with that. Yeah, he's trying to be something better. He's trying to be more than himself.
So anyway, he saves the baby and he's a legit hero at this point. And that's it for issue 5. Did you have anything else on issue 5 before we get to issue 0?
There's no special things either.
No specials. Okay. All right. You said issue 0 came in between 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Issue 0 is real simple. It's an 8-pager. But
this was one of those giveaway, because it says on the cover American Entertainment exclusive. So it was like
American Entertainment.
It was similar like those Wizard 1/2s in issue 0s that would come out, where like it'd be a half comic, with just a short.
American Entertainment is isn't that when you're comics in the 90s or early 90s, you'd be scanning through that and say American Entertainment, and they would just have tons of comics listed that you could buy from them.
Mostly exclusive covers that would cost like $20 each.
Right.
A lot of chromium covers.
So that's where this comes from. All right. Well, our first story, so by the way, I need to throw out the creative team here. It all stays the same as far as Priest and Bright go. Greg Adams still inking.
But it just listed the same creators in the beginning.
This looks like Slow Blow Hannah. That is not what that says. But
I have
anyway,
no idea then.
The letters, Dave Lanfear at Comic Crafts appear to be on letters along with somebody else. And the Atomic Paintbrush stay the same as far as the colors go. All right. All that being said, our first story, Aloysius attains nipplage. That's right. We flash back to when Woody and Eric were teens, and they're outside a girl's locker room where Woody pretends to be blind, and he walks in to attain nipplage.
Well, they're wearing scout uniforms. Woody has sunglasses on and a sign around his neck that says "Special Scout of the Year." Like he's trying to make he's making it as blatant as possible. Almost.
Yeah. It's bad. And then not only that, he gets halfway in there and Eric's like, all right, this idiot, and throws a ball at him while he's in front of these girls. And Woody catches it and they're like, wait a second. We go outside of the locker room and I think Eric is meeting up with somebody. Is it Amy or is it some? Is
I'm
Amy?
pretty sure it's
Okay.
Amy.
So he has a little bit of a discussion with her, but in the background of the locker room, you see that Woody has attained nipplage, apparently.
Convinced them that he was able, his other senses have become more specialized, so he could hear the ball coming through the air.
A real Matt Murdock here, folks.
And they're falling for it. Like you said, Woody kind of just falls into these things. He's just able to get through. And
it gives you a look at the dynamic between these two guys and their friendship. Woody being the goof and Eric trying to be the serious one. Next up is Way Ahead of You, which is the longer story here, I believe. I don't know if it's split, but it feels like Way Ahead of You had a few more pages. But again, it's only 8 pages. In this story, Quantum...
Okay. Real quick, by the way, I was finally able to find out the letters are, because you said you were trying to figure out the name.
Yeah.
So it's spelled out. I only noticed because I actually watched an episode of Castle where they spelled it out. The first name is Siobhan. So it's Siobhan.
Oh, Siobhan. Okay. Siobhan Hannah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there we go. Way Ahead of You. Quantum and Woody are attempting to escape a plane, and when they both jump, Quantum realizes Woody only grabbed one chute.
Well, actually, Quantum only grabbed one chute. Woody didn't grab any.
Oh, that's right. It's backwards. Woody expected Quantum to have the other one.
Oh, wait. I'm wondering, real quick, I'm just wondering, because the last panel of the nipplage story is Amy telling Eric, he's evil. Don't worry, God will punish him. And then, well, Way Ahead of You is also what Woody says, but I also wondering if it's a bit of God's punishment. Let's torture Woody a little bit here. So got one chute, both of you falling. And then they fight like idiots.
Yep.
And they accidentally open the chute and it falls right out of their hands.
Oh, it's great stuff. What's hilarious is that they're fighting and their argument is the thing that causes them to lose the one chute that they have.
I love the panel of the two of them just looking up.
But luckily, they're able to figure out how to use their powers to slow their descent, and they live.
This is something that will come up again in future volumes. As Woody, since he thinks he's about to die, he says, I got the rest of my life, about 15 seconds or so I guess it would be a good time to tell you, I slept with Amy.
That is he loves to use that against Eric. And it's funny that he decides. So I don't know. Maybe it was true. I mean,
I'm pretty sure it is.
I'm starting to think it might be.
Amy will show up later on in the run. She doesn't show up too much in this first few issues, but she's going to be around.
Okay. All right. I did want to throw out here, as far as issue 0 goes, editor-in-chief is a name that a lot of people from the 90s will recognize or read 90s comics, and that's Fabian Nicieza. So he's very prominent in Marvel Comics in the 90s.
The writer of New Warriors.
Right. All right.
They first appeared in the Thor issues of Acts of Vengeance, but he, along with Mark Bagley, were their creative team on it. That's kind of what first brought them to attention.
Gotcha.
And, of course, his work on the X-Men.
The X-Books. Yep,
and X-Men.
Yep. All right. Next up, we're going to get into issue 6. We start with the story Yesterday. The story focuses on how different Eric and Woody are. Eric is diligent in keeping in shape, staying on a schedule, while Woody is lazy and living a bit of a relaxed lifestyle.
I had to look up which issue it is, but 6 is a cover art homage to the cover of Fantastic Four, number 56.
Oh, I knew I recognized that. This is the one with Warrant on the front.
Yes.
And
he has Eric and Woody in one energy bubble and the goat in another one.
The goat. Yeah, a relaxed lifestyle. Woody lives a lazy and relaxed lifestyle, getting up late and eating unhealthy. So that was yesterday. Now today, Eric begins to get upset with Woody as he believes he's still asleep, and they have to hit their bands together. They got to hit their bands together every 24 hours in order not to dissipate. But he goes in and finds that Woody's not in his bed. So something's amiss. And our next story is called Still Today. Batman, now Taylor, due to copyright reasons, has shown up to talk to Eric about Quantum and Woody destroying his possessions. Hey, man, you owe me. Taylor asks to see Woody, and Eric explains he doesn't know where he's at. Taylor believes he might be in some type of trouble then. Eric finds his costume and heads out.
Yeah, because Taylor wants a job. I don't want a couple bucks for this stuff. Give me a job.
Give me something. And he's young, too. He's 16.
Yeah.
It's a rough life to live. Give the guys something to do.
He does have Eric's number here a bit, because as we've seen from some of Eric's fantasies, I mean, it's not exact. We haven't seen this yet, but from what we've seen so far, this is exact. He's right. He's like, he says, looks like you're short of one receptionist. Oh, you? I don't think so. Quantum, you got this movie playing inside your head, don't you? You want some White Gal Friday and tight James Bond minis. I bet there's a Luger mounted under the desk. And you know what? I'm pretty sure he's probably right.
Yeah, I was going to say, that probably feels like something.
He wants Miss Moneypenny to be working for them.
Yep. Next story, I guess that would be bad. Quantum goes to find Detective Tomorrow and asks for his help to find Woody. Quantum needs access to some files on the explosion, so he's kind of going back to try and find out, what exactly happened during this explosion, because, maybe Warrant has something to do with it. And so he's wanting to research this explosion and what occurred after they confronted Warrant, because Quantum believes that Warrant may still be alive and behind why Woody is missing. And then Matlock with a D. After looking over the coroner reports, Quantum is convinced that David Warrant is still alive. Next story is titled Whoops. So Eric shows up at Warrant's mother's house to try and get some of his things. So here Eric is again playing detective, trying to find out what exactly happened. He's following leads. He goes to Warrant's mom's house and says, hey, can I see some of his effects? But he gets attacked and knocked out instead.
Mom's apparently a little on in years, a little confused.
Yes.
So when he tells her about Warren being dead, she's very upset.
Yeah.
And then she tells the woman who's there with her, we don't get her name yet, that's right.
Yeah, it's Holly.
Holly, that's right. She says, Martin, your brother Martin told me. She says, Martin, where is he? She goes, right there. And she points at Eric.
Yeah,
He's trying to introduce himself. And instead, the mom, when she realizes it's not Martin, slams him over the head with a pan. It's like, this is your fault, lady. You invited the guy in and told him to start helping you make cookies.
Yeah. So Eric is out, and in our next story, Major Nelson, I presume.
He's crazy, man. Some kind of carjacker. At least we're not in a car. Housejacker. He pretended to be your brother. No, I didn't.
Housejack. Now remember, folks, time's ticking here. They've got
There's been a countdown this whole issue, and we now have like less than 3 minutes to go.
Yeah. Eric's got to try and figure something out here.
Legs are starting to disappear.
It's not good. So Eric wakes up tied on the floor, but he was able to escape his bonds. Eric remembers thinking that this was mentioned, I want to say it was issue 1, where
he found the bracelets. Yes, he found his dad's stuff in the sock drawer.
And
there's a drawer just for socks?
Woody has no clue.
His clothes are just on the bed, if you remember. His stuff is just on the floor.
And on the floor, right. So Eric immediately makes his way over to the dresser, opens up the sock drawer, and finds a pair of armbands. He grabs one of them and puts his armband on, knocking one of the others with it. As soon as they make contact with each other, a ghostly red figure appears. Sure enough, I think it's at the end of this. The next issue is David Warrant is not dead.
I want to pour down this issue. I'm giving Eric credit for all the crap we said about him for like the whole Magnum, debacle.
Oh, yes.
Let's go to Taiwan. Let's go to Egypt. He is 100% right here in everything he's saying. When he's talking to the coroner, it's like, no, he's dead. We found evidence. It's like the evidence is just a little bit in one spot. If he was exploded, he should be everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, this is not enough to be a dead person.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
Like, no, he's dead. He's gone. Don't worry about it. It's like, no, Eric is right here.
He's working his way. He's becoming a good detective here. He's becoming a good superhero, an investigator. So, yeah, I agree, man. You got to give him a little bit of credit this issue.
I want to give him all the credit I can. When he's earned it, he earned it.
He earned it. So issue 7, things changed a little bit in the creative team here. So Priest and Bright obviously still on it. Inking is going to be Romeo Tangal. And then it looks like our letters and color art are the same. So really that's the only thing that kind of changes. And you might be able to see that a little bit too. If I remember right, you could tell it's a little bit different here.
There's also a change on the cover in the title.
Oh, what did it say? I don't have it.
Quantum and Woodchuck.
Woodchuck. And yes, when we open this,
we have a person in a woodchuck mascot outfit with a gun.
Our first story is titled Rocky Bushtail Collars Up. And it's a small story outside of a toy store. A large mascot, woodchuck, foils the escape of some robbers. Happened.
Yep. All of a sudden, he's handing out balloons and pissing the kids off because he's giving them the wrong one.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he pulls his glove off, pulls out a gun, and just in the costume just starts running over cars and
chasing these robbers down. Right.
It's like, what the hell?
Next up is Thoom. As David Warrant materializes before him, Eric unleashes a power blast, sending him through a wall. Warrant's mom, Eloise, intervenes, attacking Eric yet again. David asks, is it his sister? Is that who Holly is? Or is it just her caretaker? That's right.
But she's still friends with the family. It's so David, and also we find out his ex-teacher.
Oh, that's right.
Because Eric at one point assumes, oh, you picked up some stuff. She goes, actually, I taught him.
That's right. So Holly is her name. David asks Holly to go get the control bands. David begs Eric for help, But Eric still believes that he kidnapped Woody and also blames him for his father's death. Remember, that's also there too in Eric's mind. That Warren is part of why he is in the predicament that he's in regards to the control or the armbands.
Because in the first issue, when the whole thing happened, Woody and Eric are in that containment center banging on the window. We don't hear anything he says, so nothing has changed, but we see Warren working at the controls. That's all that's seen, and that's what they're going on. But we'll get another side to that in a little bit.
That's right. So Holly finds these armbands and throws them to David. Warren grabs them, unleashes a powerful blast, and flies off with his mom.
Meanwhile, the blast.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this was not just like a small explosion. I mean, this blew the whole side of the house off. It was definitely pretty violent. I don't know if she's alive or dead. You just see David fly off with her, and she looks like she's unconscious.
And Eric's looking, going, flight.
Yeah. Like I remember reading that. And I was like, oh, okay, so is he starting to figure out that Warren knows how to use these armbands, do other things?
Also has both of them, not just one. I think he has everything that Quantum and Woody could do, but in one person. They have it split up. He has it all together. They probably could fly if they were one person. I don't remember if they ever do get to fly. I don't think so. The best is how this one ends. They're sitting there staring out the hole in the wall, and Holly says, so, I'm Holly, and then punches and knocks him out.
That was my last sentence. Holly introduces herself and then promptly punches him in the face. Our next story, Holly and Dave. Holly wakes Eric and explains she used to be involved with David and was his physics teacher at one point. Holly explains that she doubts David killed Woody and is looking for help. Taylor arrives and Holly lets Eric leave with him. So Eric's, was at the beginning of this of Holly and Dave, he was tied up, but obviously he's gotten to Holly's good graces here. And, she's trying to make a case for David. Next up, Villain Quest. While driving down the road, Eric and Taylor are attacked by David, who flips the car. Quantum demands David tell him where Woody is. I want to know where he's at right now. And David continues to deny any knowledge.
And as he said, the last thing I remember is the ISO chamber, where I was trying to shut the room down.
Yeah.
I was trying to save you.
What a twist. This whole time, we thought he purposely put them in that chamber and started the machines. He, in fact, was trying to stop the machines. So
it says you might have, in your quest for villains, I think you may have somehow missed the obvious, and hands him a phone.
Yes, please explain what happens next.
He calls a number and Woody answers. He goes, well, we don't know it's Woody. We just got a hello. And then we see basically looking like the same scene of Woody putting in the thing to play the music, except this time it's the woodchuck.
That's right. That's bringing it all around from the beginning of the issue. It was Woody that picked up a job, if I remember correctly. He said
he doesn't feel like he's getting enough money from his trust fund administrator, so he goes back to his job working security for this toy store. He's like, you were nowhere to be found. I went back to my part-time security gig over the toy store. I've been trying to raise you on the comlink in your costume for hours. I wasn't wearing my costume.
That's so great. I love how the final story is titled The Obvious. And yes, it is the obvious. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, Eric goes through all this stuff.
But I didn't realize at the end, he never actually called. He goes looking for him, but he never called.
That's true. That's the last thing that, if he would have just picked up the phone, tried to reach out to him. We did it, man. This was Quantum and Woody 0 through 7. I want to throw my best bits out there for these final few issues we just talked about. I mean, issue 4, we already talked about. I think that stands alone. My favorite bit out of issue 5 is the Batman, which was great. Issue 6. All right. We didn't talk about this. I didn't put this in my synopsis, but this was hilarious where Eric has instituted some crazy technology in his
office
home. Yeah, his office or whatever.
Have like his own bat cave, so to speak. It's behind the TV. I mean, you literally walk through the TV.
It's crazy. And I think Taylor is very surprised when he watches Eric just get up and walk through the TV. But I think they go into...
Well, because Woody's office is on the other side of it. Woody's office, which just has a television and a chair.
And then the door...
That was going to be mine too, yeah.
Yes, that door. Explain what that door looks like.
It's just a door, and it has Christmas lights taped around it, and a sign over it says Eric's Stupid Lab. And on the door is a sign. Behind this door is a high-tech secret lab. Go right in. And then 2 signs to the side with giant arrows, like in Looney Tunes. Look, no locks. Go in and mess with his crap. And Eric's line, what he doesn't know is that I modified the doorknob so only his hand can open it.
That's probably number 2 for me. We got the car bit, and then we got this. I was just like, this is hilarious. This nails down the Woody character. That right there is a perfect example of the type of person Woody is, and the type of person Eric is, by making sure that this dumbass doesn't actually do that. And of course, number 7, I screenshotted the panel, and all it is just Quantum holding the phone up to his head, and on the other end it says hello. And that's when he realizes that he went to all this and all he had to do was really pick up a phone. Christopher Priest just nails the dialogue and the storytelling here by him and Bright. I would have loved to have read this back in 97. I definitely get why people talk about how good this series is. Not only Evan was talking about it, I think Dean mentioned it a couple times. He was like, yeah, I mean, it's and actually Derry as well. He had said, oh yeah, it's really good. I'm not arguing. This is great, man. So what are your final thoughts, dude?
Oh, I really enjoyed this series back then because it was something different than what we were getting at the time. It was more irreverent, but it wasn't just irreverent. It wasn't just funny to be funny. There was more to it too. There's more to it, these characters, but it still was a amusing, semi-realistic take on what if somebody tried to become a superhero, although they do have powers. Obviously they're still a little better at it than, let's say, when they tried doing Hitman. Obviously Hitman would not have been able to scale those walls or climb the mountains. It's a little too easy for them. But maybe Eric could, but Woody, but it's also just a fun character piece on these two because they're both idiots.
They both have.
Eric is way too serious. Woody is way too relaxed about everything for an adult.
Yeah. What's interesting is Eric is the guy that's kind of trying to work through his stuff. Woody, if you try to point out the stuff that he needs to work through, probably wouldn't care. But that's the dynamic between these two.
Well, Woody deflects, but you notice most of the stuff he's trying to do is to help Eric, like becoming a superhero.
Right.
He's deflecting by helping Eric as opposed to avoiding his own problems.
There's a lot here. The humor is top notch in my opinion, but there's also a lot of commentary about some very serious things.
And
I
there's
believe
that
that's happening here.
Yes.
That's good when you can balance that. Make it a good story that's fun to read and also say a few important things, all the more better, in my opinion. I had a great time. I know you threw this out there, and I don't know if you'd like to continue volume 2 or not. I don't know if that's something you would be interested in doing at some point.
This is a good reason for me to reread this stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm definitely down. I'd love to move on to volume 2. We'll talk about scheduling that at some point in the future. I want to extend my thanks for you coming on here. A great book to talk about and also celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Source Materials. I had a great time discussing this book with you here. What do you got going on over at the Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast?
The show has been on a bit of a hiatus. Hopefully by the end of October, the show should be coming back. Because I did a bit of hiatus, personal stuff, life. I just need a break. But we're starting doing recordings again, and the show's going to be coming back very soon. So the plan is around Halloween. Hopefully we'll be have an episode then, and probably an episode at the end of November and December, and then starting in January back to regular bi-weekly episodes. I've already recorded issues with my friend Brian talking about Silver Surfer 34. And our back half of my Friends and Enemies segment with a certain somebody who does a source material podcast.
Hey, that's me.
We're going to be starting up on that run of Silver Surfer by Starlin and Ron Lim that leads up to the Infinity Gauntlet.
Cannot wait. Man, that sounds great. I look forward to you coming back. We run in some same podcast circles. And some people have been recognizing that you took your hiatus. So it'll be welcome to see you on the podcatcher once again. I'll tell you that much.
It's going to be fun to be back. Sometimes you need to take a break from stuff before things become too much of a job. Yeah. It's nice to come back.
Been there. As for myself here on the Source Material Comics podcast, we got usually about three different shows that show up here on the feed, one of which is the Source Material Comics podcast, where we talk comics of any era. You can hear all sorts of different guests. I think we're over 300 episodes in the Source Material library, so I'm sure there's something in the archive that might tickle your fancy. Go out and check that out if you can. And then the Unspoken Issues podcast in affiliation with the Unspoken Decade. Check that out. We're 90s comics centric. This would fit right in there, but I needed something for Source Material. Yeah, so you could, we got all sorts of episodes. Al's been on a couple of them, if I remember correctly. Yep. The last one I recorded with Evan and Chris, we were talking some amalgam issues. And then, of course, me and Evan Bevins get together once a month and we release Snap Material, where we talk the Marvel mobile card game Marvel Snap. And we talk about the previous season, the upcoming season. We have our top fives that we create out of that. And we also talk about what we unlocked and some of the gameplay that we had during the previous season. So that's a lot of fun. Usually about 4 20-minute episodes. We also do a battle, but we usually do that live on YouTube. So that is it. I think I have covered everything that I am a part of. Once again, I appreciate you coming on, sir.
Thank you for having me. This is something I wouldn't have a chance to talk about normally. I appreciate the opportunity to indulge me with going back to memory lane reading this.
For sure. All right, we're out of here. That's Al. I'm Jesse. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.